about this idea where the females always choose, and the answer is no. Sometimes the males get a choice in what we call this sex role reversal. So one of those examples was the Wilson Farlow, where the female's not overly bright, but she's definitely bright. Then the male, so she's trying to attract the attention of these males. And so the question then became, well, when is this operational sex ratio skewed in a way that there's more females that are available to breed than there are males? And so one of those cases was the Phalarope, where you had the males tended to the nest. So they're going to sit on the eggs, they're going to incubate the eggs until they hatch. So basically that male is going to be unavailable for taking care of any other eggs for about 3 weeks. So he is unreceptive to mating because mating and then not having a male to take care of the eggs makes no sense for either the male or the female. And so the females can have more than one nest with many males. And so the females are going to be the ones that are competing for the males, trying to get as many males as they can, and the males are the ones that are going to choose which female which female's eggs they want to take care of. So this skews the sex ratio because more females are receptive than males. Here's another example. So this is an example again where the male is putting in some other investment. In the Phalaropes, the males were putting in investment time into caring for the eggs. Here we have the Mormon cricket. The males will actually deposit spermatophore. And so basically they're secreting this spermatophore as a nuptial gift to the female. It's about 25% of their total body weight. So they're giving a quarter of their body weight to the female as a source of food and energy for the female. So that's a big investment. So once the male has supplied this nuptial gift to one female, they're not able to supply it to another. So this is going to skew our sex ratio as well. Females can breed with more males, and so therefore the males get to choose which female they want to give that spermatophore to. Here, similar example with the cricket with the spermatophore production. But the spermatophore is only important if there's not other food available to the females. So here in the Australian katydids, the sex roles actually vary depending on how much pollen there is in the area. If there's not much pollen, so low food source, the males that can provide, males that are producing the spermatophores are going to be choosy. They have a spermatophore that the females need, so they can choose which female they want to give that to. So they have something that the females want, so the females have to try and compete for that spermatophore. But if the pollen is high and there's lots of other food in the environment, then it's the females that do the choosing again. So here we see this kind of conditional change between sex roles within a species depending on the environment. Here we can see how this sex role can actually change throughout the season as well. So this is spotted goby, and what we're looking at here is we're looking at basically the number of males that have territories. So those are the males that are available to breed. So what's going to happen here is the females will lay their eggs in the territory of a male, and that male will take care of the eggs in that territory, guard the eggs. So again, the male is giving an investment of time. So early in the season, there's lots of males that have territories. And so these males are competing with each other to try and convince the females to come lay eggs in their territory. So here we have 0.56 territorial males per square meter, 0.15 females that are ready to spawn, lay eggs. And so here we have a sex ratio that is skewed towards more males than females that are available to breed. So again, this would be sexual competition between the males to try and get the females to lay eggs in their territory. In June, we have more females that are ready to spawn as they get larger and go back through another reproductive cycle. The number of territorial males per square meter, however, has decreased, either because they are busy caring for eggs already, or because maybe predation has reduced their population size. So now we see that there's a skew for more females than males, And that continues as you go later into the season. If you look in late July, there's a lot more females than males. So here, the males in late July are going to be the choosy ones. Which female do they actually want to lay eggs in their territory? And the females are going to be competing to be the chosen one to lay eggs in that male's territory. So again, this changes depending on environment, depending on time of year, but it all has to do with this operational sex ratio. So the question becomes, well, what if you're not a dominant male? What if you don't have a large spermatophore? What if you're not the male that the female wants? How do you then reproduce? So that's what we're going to talk about next. So we're going to talk about, in the next PowerPoint, we're going to talk about some alternative approaches for securing copulations, different ways to go about rather than being the most dominant male. We'll talk about sperm competition, so actually competition within the sperm, and then we'll talk a little bit more about sexual selection and mate choice. So there are kind of three different ways that these subordinate males can potentially get reproductive opportunity. If you're not a dominant male, what are some of these alternative strategies? So you can't compete for sexual partners. If a female has a choice, she's going to choose somebody else. How are you going to then try and secure some of these, some copulations and pass on some offspring? One of the strategies is to form some kind of bond with the female. And this is seen in baboons, where basically these subordinate male baboons that are kind of hanging around in the troop, but the dominant male is preventing them from mating with any of the females. And so these subordinate males will kind of befriend the female. They'll form a bond with each other. They'll help protect her and her offspring. And so the next time that she is ready to reproduce, she may come to this male with that opportunity. So here we have this bond that is forming between the male and the female that may allow this male to have some chance to reproduce. And so here we see the proportion of the female time to be spent with these different males, and the blue line is kind of our expected distribution. We would expect the females to spend more time with the dominant males that generally are fathering more of the offspring. But what we actually observe is that they spend less time with those dominant males than we would expect and more time with the subordinate males. So this is suggesting that these subordinate males may be employing this strategy of trying to form a bond so that the female may come to him the next time she's ready to reproduce. And again, he's offering her something that she may not get from the dominant male, and that he's willing to protect her and her offspring and devote time to raising those offspring. The other thing you can do is try and find a place where you're not going to be harassed by that dominant male. So some place where the females may be, where the dominant male is not, and then trying to get in your reproductive opportunities during that time. So the dominant males tend to try to monopolize these females of gray seals on beaches. But in the water, the dominant male generally cannot fight with other males and generally does not try to control an area in the water. So if you're a subordinate male, you can find a mate swimming in the water that's away from the dominant males. You may have time to carry out a copulation. And it's been shown in the gray seals that many of the young are fathered by these subordinate males that gain copulations in the water away from the dominant male. So this is another strategy here. In some cases, it gets even more aggressive. So northern fur seals, the males will maintain territories on the beaches, and females will then settle into these male territories. So it's not just one dominant male that is breeding with most of the females, but some males have more females in their harem than others. And so what might happen is some of the males may come over onto a territory and force a female into their own territory, and basically try to keep her there until she is willing to mate with him. So actually abducting or taking this this female is forcing her onto your territory to have more mating opportunities. Another example is to basically sneak in a copulation as quick as you can, get it over with so that the dominant male doesn't see you. So even if the females, in some of these species, the females have no problem mating with the subordinate males, but the dominant males are basically trying to prevent it. So males that can get in there and get the job done and get out may have an advantage. And so here we have our marine iguanas, and the small males tend to get displaced by larger males during copulation. So here is our female, and you see all these males all trying to mate with her at the same time. And usually it's the larger male that wins that battle. And so what the smaller males will do is they'll actually ejaculate prior to copulation and to store that sperm in their bodies, keep it in their bodies, and then basically they can release that sperm as soon as they come in contact with the female, so they don't need to be there a long time. So if they do get pushed off by a larger male, they're at least getting some of their sperm and potential for fertilizing some of the eggs. So they're making it as quick as possible before they get pushed off. So these are just some of the different strategies. Obviously, if we went and looked over all the species, there's going to be lots of different ways that these subordinate males are going to try and get their reproductive success. But sometimes we see that these strategies change. And I already showed you an example of this with the katydids, where the sex role reversal. But here we have conditional strategies for the males. So when we're talking about these conditional strategies, basically what we're talking about is that these males have a way to alter their behavior to make it adaptive in certain conditions. So they're going to maximize their reproductive success based on the environmental condition. What's really important about this definition, though, is this inherited mechanism. So these males can change their behavior from one reproductive behavior to another depending on the condition. But the ability to do that is genetically determined. It's inherited from one generation to the next, the ability to switch back and forth. And so the two different strategies, these two different behaviors, are not individually genetically determined. But the mechanism that allows them to go back and forth between them does have a genetic component to it. So that's an important part of this conditional strategy. But again, depending on what the environmental conditions are. So the inherited mechanisms allow them to change mating strategy based on conditions. This can be conditions of the environment or conditions of the male himself. So the individuals have this flexibility to basically get the highest possible fitness that they can given the constraints of their social standings or their environment. So a lot of these conditional strategies depend on where they fit in the social system. Dominant males will have a different strategy than subordinate males, and they can change that throughout their lifetime because of this inherited mechanism that lets them kind of judge their condition, their social status, and change back and forth. So here's one example of this, these conditional strategies. The horned scarab beetle. It actually will have changes in development and behavior during the larval stage. So during the larval stage, the smaller males they recognize some kind of cue, gives them they're developing cells recognition that they are smaller than the other males. That socially they are less dominant than the other males. And so this triggers a developmental change so that these males are going to invest more resources in the testes rather than in horns. The horns would be used for either female selection, so selecting a male with the larger horn, or in battles between the male beetles, where generally the one with the larger horn wins. So they're probably going to lose most of the battles anyway because of their smaller size. So developing a horn would be kind of a waste of energy. So instead, they develop larger testes, they'll sneak into the burrow of the female and basically deposit large amounts of sperm into the female, hoping that because there's more sperm, they'll get more offspring than the more dominant males that maybe are mating with more females or have more access to females. So here we have a conditional change that actually changes the development of the organism. And so here we can see this. So basically what we're looking at here, the y-axis is our testes weight, x-axis is our body weight. So the testes size is related to body size, basically proportional. We can see that. But what we have here is we have our control individuals. Those individuals that have horns are normally developed, or are males that develop horns are in the red dots. The ones without horns are in the green dots. And what you can see is that relative to their body weight, the green dots are a little higher up on the y-axis. So they have slightly larger testes relative to their body weights when they don't have a horn. So they're going to produce more sperm and basically try and swamp out sperm from other males in order to fertilize as many eggs as they can. So this is kind of a form of sperm competition. So the subordinate males have larger testes and produce more sperm. And I believe we looked at an example of this with the monogamous and the polygamous primates as well, where we saw the monogamous or the polygamous primates generally had larger testes than the monogamous ones. Another strategy is to be a satellite male. So basically, these are the guys that are going to wait around by another male. When a female tries to come in because she's attracted to the other male, he's going to try and copulate with her. So he knows that he can't attract the female. He's going to hang out with somebody that can and try and sneak in a copulation. So this happens in frogs. Here we see the dominant male. Here, there's the female. And you can see all these satellite males that are kind of following her around, trying to get their chance. And so we'll talk about mate guarding later on, but this dominant male is going to try and guard her from all these satellite males. So the satellite males are just kind of hanging around, floating around, trying to get any opportunity that they can. Let's talk about satellite males in horseshoe crabs. So here's our female horseshoe crab. Here's our dominant male that has attached to her. He's going to fertilize most of the eggs. Here's our two satellite males that are basically trying to do anything they can to fertilize some eggs. And so these attached males are going to fertilize about 10% more eggs than the satellites. So the satellites are still fertilizing some eggs, just not as many as the attached males. So again, it's the dominant males that tend to be attached to the females. So again, the social status is playing a part. And these horseshoe crab males can switch back and forth. If they're the dominant male, they'll attach. If they're not the dominant male, they'll be a satellite. So here we see this conditional strategy. So the question is, or that some researchers ask, well, when do you attach or when do you not attach? When do you be a satellite male? When do you try to attach? And what they noticed was that attaching seemed to be related to physical condition, where the captured male or the attached males seem to be in better physical condition than the satellite males. So they did a study where they captured the males, they determined their physical condition, then they released the males back into the ocean with plastic bags on their claws. And this prevented them from attaching to the females. And so, because they couldn't attach to the females, it may give us some measure of the different strategies between the males based off of their physical condition, which we know. Because the males that we thought were in poorer condition, we would expect to be satellite males. The males that were in better condition, we would expect to be the dominant males that would attach. And so since they can attach, we wouldn't really expect them to show up anymore, because they're going to try to attach and not be able to. And that's what this study saw. The good conditioned males did not return to the beach because they couldn't. They were trying to attach to the female, but they couldn't because they couldn't use their claws. The poor conditioned males still returned to the beach as satellites. So they made this connection between satellite males in poor condition and the good males that are the ones that are trying to attach. So again, the attached males, the one in good condition, are going to get more mating opportunities. And so here basically is looking at this reproductive success of these different males based off of their condition. If you're in good condition and you're attached, you get more reproductive success than if you're a good male and you're a satellite, right? We said it was about 10% that the attached males fertilize about 10% more eggs than the satellite males. Looks like a little bit more right here if you're in good condition. Slightly scale of 4 on our condition scale here. Still, attaching is better than being a satellite. If you're a condition 3, it's about equal. And if you're in poor condition, you're better off being a satellite. But overall, the attached males fertilize more eggs than the satellite males. But it depends which strategy is adopted by these crabs. By the horseshoe crabs is dependent on their condition. So a question that I want to ask you. All right, so we have satellite and attached male horseshoe crabs. They do not have the same reproductive success. Generally, attached males have higher reproductive success. So the question I have is, why hasn't sexual selection eliminated the lower payoff satellite option? If the males that are satellites do not leave as many descendants as the attached males do, why hasn't this behavior of satellite males completely disappeared and we only have attached males that attach? So take a couple minutes, think about that, see if anybody can come up with an answer for this question. There's probably at least 2 answers for this. Anybody have any ideas?
Well, who's to say that an attached male was never a satellite male at one point during her lifetime?
Okay, so that's one possible answer to this question. Remember, it's based off of condition. So these satellite males may be in poor condition now, but later on they might be in better condition and be able to attach. So they're basically just making the best of the situation that they can now, but later on they may become an attached male. Or it could be the other way around. They used to be the dominant male. They're getting older, but they're still getting as many as they can. So that's one possible explanation. It's kind of related to the other one. It's one or the other. But anybody else have another possible explanation? It really is related to what you just said.
What did you say? Like, if you got to the female and there's already another male attached on, you have no choice. Unless you wanted to go find another one.
Right, so it's going to, again, making the best, depending on what the operational sex ratio is, that may be your only option. So getting some offspring is better than getting no offspring. Those of you that are in evolution, we just talked about this the other day, here in 427. Remember, for evolution through natural selection to occur, we have to have a connection between the phenotype and the fitness. What else do we have to have a connection between? The phenotype and the genotype. So remember, these 2 phenotypes of attached or satellite are not controlled genetically. There's genetics that allow them to go back and forth between these 2 behaviors, but one behavior does not have a different allele from the other behavior. So we wouldn't expect the satellite option to disappear because it has these individuals have essentially the same genetic makeup as the attached individuals. So there's no change in allele frequencies that's going on here because they have essentially the same genetic makeup. So both of those kind of go together, but those would be the 2 explanations that you could come up with that would explain those why we still have that satellite option. Now we're going to talk about distinct mating strategies. These are genetically controlled mating strategies. These are not conditional strategies. These are genetically determined strategies of the male. And so here we have a shorebird called the ruff. The ruff has 3 genetically determined strategies. We have territorial males, which are going to display to attract females. So we can see these guys over here. They're displaying, trying to attract a female. We have our satellite males. These guys over here, kind of inconspicuous. They don't really look like males. The males don't really pay too much attention to them. They sneak around. They try and sneak copulations as these females come close to the male. The third genetically determined strategy is to look like a female. If you look like a female, the males are going to let you go wherever you want to go. You don't have to put energy into a big feathery shows. Instead, you have larger testes. And therefore, you can swamp out the other male's sperm. So you're going to, when you get a chance to copulate with that female, you're going to put in more sperm and increase the likelihood that it's your sperm that fertilizes the eggs rather than the sperm of the other males. So in these roughs, we have 3 distinct strategies. And these are genetically determined strategies. All of them still appear in populations. So one of the things that we can do is we can compare these distinct mating strategies from these conditional mating strategies. If the males have distinct mating strategies, so genetically controlled, we would expect the following to occur. We would expect the differences between types should be because of genetic differences. That's one of the key components to this distinct mating strategy. That is genetically controlled. The males are genotypically different, and that's what creates their different mating strategies. As opposed to in conditional mating strategies where the males are strategy is not controlled by genetics. And then the other thing we would assume or expect would be that if we have these distinct mating strategies amongst the males and they both still exist, since they are genetically controlled, we must assume that they must have equal reproductive success. Because if one of them was better than the other, through natural selection, we would expect the lesser strategy to disappear over time through natural selection. So since we see all 3 of these strategies in the rough, we can make the prediction that their lifetime reproductive success is essentially equal to each other. And so some researchers collected some data on some other species, not on the roughs, but kind of going along with the same idea. So here we're talking about this marine isopod that lives inside of sponges. 3 different sized males. Again, a distinct mating strategy. These are genetically controlled. We have our alpha male. So these are the males that are going to try to keep other males out. They're going to be territorial, trying to keep the females for themselves. We have our beta males, which are female mimics. So just like in the rough, they're going to be able to go basically wherever they want, generally have larger testes, and so on. And then we have our gamma males, which are the sneaker males. So essentially the same 3 strategies that we saw in the rough. Here we got a little bit more territoriality in the alpha male rather than trying to attract the female. So these alpha males will try and control territories, control sponges where they can breed the female. And if we look at the evidence for these distinctive mating strategies, 1, the size and the mating behavior are a result of a single gene with 3 alleles. Okay, so there's a genetic component here of 3 alleles that are determining whether you are alpha, beta, or gamma. So that's one of the criteria we need for a distinct mating strategy. The second thing that they did was they looked at different combinations of males and females in sponges in the lab. So in the lab, they have sponges, they have different ratios of males and females. And what they saw was that depending on what the sex ratio was, some males did better. So one mating strategy did better than the other, depending on what those sex ratios are. And looking at all of the possible sex ratios, we can see that on average you get the number of mates was similar. So again, you have variation here, but no significantly different number of mates found for any of these strategies. So we met all 3 of our predictions here for our distinctive mating strategies. Genetic control and essentially equal reproductive success. The alphas have slightly more females, but the betas and the gammas probably are producing more sperm also. So if we would have went a step further and looked at the number of eggs fertilized, it might even be closer to being equal. So we have to remember that as well. Bluegill sunfish are another example of distinct strategies. Same three strategies that we saw before in the other species. Territorial, small sneaker, and female mimic. So the female mimic can, again, kind of move in with the group of females and not be harassed by other males. So we see this in a variety of different species. We've seen it in fish now, we've seen it in birds, and we've seen it in invertebrates. And so these strategies these alternative strategies definitely exist in nature. The second way to try to outcompete the dominant males is through sperm competition. So if you're a subordinate male that maybe won't get as many mates, or an equal opportunity to mate, or as long to copulate with a female, we can have sperm competitions, where the competition between males that determines whose sperm will fertilize the female's egg when both of the male sperm are accepted. So the female's taking sperm from both of them, accepting copulations from both of them. The sperm competition is going to basically determine which male wins by which sperm gets to fertilize the most eggs. Generally, more sperm and faster sperm can be advantageous in this situation. So again, the larger testes producing more sperm for some of these subordinate individuals. Some males can actually adjust the number of sperm, or how many sperm they release for a female, based off of the amount of sperm from previous mates. So somehow, chemically, it can calculate how much sperm the female's already accepted, decide how much sperm it wants to put into that situation. So the scorpion fly is a good example of that. So in this study, they looked at how long a female mated with a male, and then they looked at the how long it mated with the second male. And what they found was that the second male would mate a shorter amount of time if that female had already mated with the previous male for a long time period. So there was an inverse relationship between the time spent copulating with the first male and the time that the second male spent copulating with the female. So basically the males were saying, okay, she's already got a lot of sperm, she had a long copulation before, I'm not going to put a lot into this, I'm going to go try and find another one where I'm not going to have as much competition. And so this happened even if the second mate was not there to watch that copulation. So again, there's some kind of chemical signal going on here to tell the male basically how long that copulation, that previous copulation was. So they're actually adjusting that based off of the amount of competition. Other species, the males will actually remove the competitor's sperm. So a female will copulate with a male, the second male will come in and using these hooks here will remove the sperm from the female, pull it out, and they can remove anywhere from 90 to 100% of the competing sperm. So rather than trying to compete with that sperm, they're going to remove that sperm and then release their own gametes into the female. In some species, the female gets to choose which sperm wins by basically determining which sperm is going to fertilize the egg. So one example, the female damselfly can mate with another male just to get that sperm cleaned out. So if she doesn't like the sperm from that first male, she knows that if she doesn't know, but evolutionarily, if she mates with another male, that sperm's going to get removed and she can get more desirable sperm. So the female kind of has some choice in ultimately which sperm fertilizes the eggs. Female dunnarts, birds, we'll learn about this in a minute, birds can actually store sperm. Female birds will store sperm and then release it later on to fertilize the eggs. But the female dunnarts can actually eject their sperm from a previous male. So here we have a male that's pecking at the female, and this can cause her to release the sperm from a previous male so that he doesn't have sperm competition. But the female has a choice as to whether she's going to release that sperm or not. So we have some female choice here in the sperm competition. So as I mentioned, these female birds can store sperm. And so here you can see the sperm storage tubules here that are on the wall of the uterus in these females. And so they can store the sperm. Generally, the sperm from the males that mated earlier that's stored becomes less viable over time. And so it's the kind of more recent male that usually fertilizes most of the eggs. So this female, again, has a choice. She can store the sperm, look for a more desirable male if she chooses, or she can choose to have her eggs fertilized by that first male, depending on what that strategy or what that male was like. So that, again, these female birds tend to have some choice. We can also see sperm competition in what we refer to as extra pair copulations. So most birds have a kind of socially monogamous mating strategy, meaning that you have a male and a female, and they're going to raise the young together, especially birds that have young in the nest that need to be cared for, what we call altricial young. And so you got the male and the female both caring for the young. They form this social pair, but they're not completely monogamous in that they can copulate with other individuals. So in a nest, you may have eggs that were fathered by that social monogamous male, and maybe eggs that were fathered by another male through an extra pair copulation as well. And so what we see here is that if we look at the number of sperm that are stored in these female collared flycatchers, and we look at that in relationship to how much of that sperm belongs to their social mate, and how much of that is from an extra pair copulation, and we look at that during the breeding phase, you can see that early on it's about even, right? Social partner only, extra pair mate as well. So what that's showing here is it's not total sperm amount, but it's showing that about an even number of the females have only their social partner sperm and their social partner and some other males as well. So it's showing some evidence of this extra pair copulation. In the middle of the breeding phase, we see a lot more females that have extra pair sperm, and even later on as well, there's more of them. So here again, we see this difference in the phase. The female here early on is forming this social bond. Mating with this male helps to keep the male around, help and reinforce that bond. We've talked about that before. But then she can solicit these extra pair copulations as well. So I mentioned this strategy of mate guarding. So we have a couple videos here if they work. These are king eiders. So that is the male. So you can see the coloration on the male can be used to attract the female. You also have the tail feathers on the back. Contrasting white and black makes it really obvious. And eventually here you get to another male. Somewhere here's a female. Here's our female, so you can see this sexual dimorphism here. And you can see the male chasing the other male away. So he's essentially guarding the female from other males. Let's stop that. We'll go back to mate guarding by the rams. So there's the male and his female here. So now he's guarding the female, trying to keep the other male away, so that he's the only one that has access to breed with him. So here comes some other males that are going to try and sneak. So here we see these satellite males, or these sneakers, trying to take advantage over these dominant males. Here he comes. So mate guarding is another common behavior to, it's really a form of sperm competition, kind of, to prevent the female from accepting sperm from that male. Some other extreme examples here, the male is actually attached to the female, and then here we see the male guarding the female in fish. So it's not just mammals and birds, invertebrates and fish also have mate guarding. Another example here, mate guarding by a bird, meadow pipits. The males actually become more aggressive when the female is present, so this is some evidence of this mate guarding idea. So here we have behaviors that are low aggressiveness to high aggressiveness, physical contact being the most aggressive form, and yellow bars are when there's no females around, the maroon, purple, pink, whatever color of bars that is when the females are present. And so what you can see is that as when the females are present, you get more high aggressive behaviors, especially physical contact. So again, this shows a form of mate guarding, which is common among territorial animals and birds. So if you're out walking around, you see a group of robins. Every once in a while, you'll see kind of 3 robins kind of flying around in a circle. Usually that's one male mate guarding a female from another male. You can identify the female robin because she's slightly similar colors, but she's slightly drabber than the male. It's going to have a brighter chest and a darker gray color. Some birds have adaptive mate guarding, meaning that they change their behavior again, kind of based off of certain environment, certain conditions or statuses. So Seychelles warbler will actually stop mate guarding after the female lays her first egg. There's no point in mate guarding at that point because all the eggs have been fertilized. She's no longer accepting copulations. It's a waste of energy to try and guard her because any copulations that she has at this point on are not going to result in any eggs. And so there's no need to mate guard after she lays that first egg. And here we can see some experimental evidence of this. So here's kind of the natural population here. And so here we can see a couple of different measures here. The purple thing is the number of intrusions, so this is basically the number of times other males come into the territories. The greens are the number of times that those other males try to copulate with the female, and the reds are the number of times that they were successful. And so generally you can see generally low number of intrusions, low extra pair copulation attempts, and low success rate when that female is fertile because of the mate guarding of the male in a natural situation. Here's where the first egg is laid, and then you can see that there's no intrusions, there's no attempts, and so the male doesn't need to mate guard after this point. In this experiment, what they did was that they took these nests with these eggs, or without eggs, and they looked at the same 3 measures, but what they did is they added a model egg so that the male would think that the female had laid her first egg. So they tricked the male into thinking the female has laid her first egg, she's no longer fertile or receptive to other males, and what we see is that, so here's the model egg here is introduced right here on this day, and what we see is that the number of intrusions, the number of extra pair copulation attempts, and the number of successful extra pair copulations goes up right after that egg is put into the nest because the male stops mate guarding. And so after the female is fertile, you can see all three of those behaviors go to 0. So there's no need to mate guard after that first egg is laid. Here, they were able to trick the males, and you can see that mate guarding is definitely necessary during this period where the female is fertile before she actually lays her first egg. And so they were able to get some experimental evidence of the benefit of mate guarding for this warbler species. Mate guarding obviously takes energy, it takes time, and so here we can see this this trade-off between mate guarding and time spent foraging. And so you can see that the more neighbors they have, the more time they spend mate guarding, right? And the more time they spend mate guarding, the less time they spend foraging. So there's a trade-off here that ultimately could affect the male's fitness because it's spending less time foraging and more time mate guarding in a crowded environment. But we did see that there's an advantage to mate guarding because without mate guarding, there's a good chance that some of those eggs in that nest have not been fathered by the male that's going to help raise them. And so the mate guarding helps to ensure that. All right, then the third thing that we need to talk about is this idea of sexual selection and mate choice. So mate choice, again, is mainly by the females, and it's usually based off of a variety of male traits. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about female mate choice and what kind of criteria is she using to select those mates. So here's a study that looked at mate choice in a butterfly, where the females seem to be choosing the males based off of this iridescent color pattern that you see here. So what they did is they took butterflies and they looked at this iridescent pattern. So here's our reflected pattern at different wavelengths. And what they did is they took the control butterflies, this normal pattern. In this case, they put a substance over the wings. So basically the color pattern is still the same, but it's blocking kind of the UV, which changes the iridescence pattern of those butterflies. And then here they completely black them out with basically a Sharpie. And so now we have the black male. And then they looked at female choice and the number of matings that these different types of males had. And control males have more matings than the other two. And you can see that here, even though this male still has the spots, it actually has the same number of matings as the all-black male. So that iridescence associated with that UV radiation seems to really have play a role here. So that's one way that females can choose mates. In our hanging fly, the size of the nuptial gift, which in this case is a prey item rather than a spermatophore, relates to the duration of the copulation. So again, the longer the copulation, generally the more sperm, the more eggs you're going to fertilize. And so the larger the prey item, in this case it's a moth, the longer the copulation. So the females are choosing how long they want to mate with males based off of the gift, how good of a gift it is. We talked about the redback spider before as one of our Darwinian puzzles, where the male is essentially mating with the female and then gives him, he mates with the female and then he basically does a backflip right into her mouth after he has finished, so that she then will consume him, and this is the nuptial gift that he's bringing. And so the female will choose the males that are offering a nuptial gift. In this case, the male is offering himself. And the energy from that male can then be used to raise his offspring, obviously, so there is benefit to them. And so one of the questions we can ask is, well, do some females choose the best parent? In some species, the males help to take care of the young. So are they looking for the males that are the best parent? So we refer to this as the good parent theory. So the females may select males with traits that indicate superior parental care. And that may be color, ornamentation, size of the nuptial gift, something like that, food items that are brought in. That might indicate how good of a hunter, how good of a parent this individual might be. However, there's lots of species where the males do not help with parental care, and the females still choose the males based off of ornamentation and color and those kinds of things. So this is some evidence against this kind of good parent theory, or at least that this good parent theory is universal, right? It may still exist for some species. So the question is, do courtships or characteristics of the males, these secondary characteristics, convey some kind of information about mate quality? Because females seem to be choosing these males that have certain traits, certain colors, certain ornamentations. So is this conveying some kind of information to the female? So that if females choose males with that trait, they're getting some kind of benefit. That's what we would expect to occur, is that the females that choose males with certain traits produce more offspring. So the question is, well, what are these females getting? What do these different ornaments and these different courtship displays advertise? And there's basically 4 theories to explore, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. It could be a combination of them within a species. But basically we can say that this information might say, hey, I'm healthy, which is a good thing. That means that they probably have genes that are resistant to bacteria and diseases and those kinds of things. You could just say that overall they have good genes that are robust in the environment that they live in. So basically they're good all the way around. We talked about this, I guess we haven't talked about it here yet, this idea of runaway selection, where we have certain traits that are selected for by females, and then her sons then have those traits. So they get selected for by females, and those traits keep getting larger and larger. We'll talk about those. And then we'll talk about chase-away selection as well, which is similar to the runaway selection. But here we basically have a summary of these 4 different theories. Healthy mates, indicative of male health, so the females don't get diseases. That's one thing as well. Good genes, indicative of male viability, so the offspring then inherit those good genes, so that's good. Runaway selection is advertising how sexually attractive that male is. The female would then have sons that are sexually attractive, so that would help to pass on her genes in future generations. And then there's the chase-away selection, which is kind of the hardest one to understand. But basically what's going on here is that females have some hardwired response to where they find some characteristic of males irresistible. And they want to mate with those males that have that characteristic, but they get no benefit from it. It's just some pre-sensory bias that, for whatever reason, say a red male, they really want to mate with that red male, and so they mate with the red male. And so it just kind of exists because it was there in some, before the male even had that trait. It just existed in the females that some kind of chemical process occurred inside the body when they see a certain characteristic. And then when a male happened to have a mutation where they have that characteristic, those males got more copulations. So it's the hardest one to kind of understand. Next time we'll go through some examples of each of them, from the healthiness to the good genes to the chase-away selection. So we'll finish this up next time, and then we'll move on to